Good morning, everybody. We'll open the meeting. I'd like to ask Pino, would you like to open the meeting, please? Amen. So we're actually waiting for a bit of expertise in the room from either Wolfgang or David. So this time we'll just adjourn. Happy to help out? Yeah. Yeah, because there's a couple of questions within minutes. Sorry? Oh, I saw his name at the table, but okay. Okay. Well, we'll carry on. We've got the chief executive with us, so that's good. So, yeah. Any declarations of interest? No. So we go to confirmation of non-confidential minutes on page 4. The mover, please. Thank you, Angus. Seconder. Thank you, Larry. Okay, we open it for discussion. Any discussion around the minutes, please? Thank you. So, okay, we've got a mover and Angus. They've been seconded by Larry. All in favour? Aye. Thank you, Kerry. So we'll flow on to the action sheet on page 9. And this is where I was personally hoping that, but maybe Nadine can help me out here. Just, I noticed one of the actions from the 3rd of the 9th, the annual report would be discussed with the chair prior to the next hui to ensure the chair was able to freely participate in the annual report discussion. So I think that really related to previous chair Amber. But, so anything from the action sheet on page 9, please. Any other comments? Okay, so we'll move on from the action sheet. So, leave of absence, acknowledgements and tributes, public input and deputations, extraordinary business, notice of motion, adjourned business. We're on a bit of a flyer, so we're going to go to 10, page 10, Wastewater Management Committee, the annual report. This is where I was.
The clarification as to which annual report.
Yeah, so we've noted we're looking for clarification of which annual report. So we'll have to come back on that. So what we go to 10.2, wastewater treatment plant stage 2 delivery update. So who's going to be doing that? So we're waiting for, is it CPS? 2024. Would be saying go to 2024. So we'll go to page 21 to 24, and we'll get Tracy to come and give us her report. Yeah, you happy to come up here, Trace? Thank you. So it's page actually 29 of 74. So we'll leave it with you, Tracy.
So I didn't have a presentation as such, but basically what I've done in the attachment that was attached to this document was basically just go clause by clause through the consent and just go through what was compliant and any sort of comments that we had around it. So basically for the 1920, so that's July of 2019 to June of 2020, the wastewater treatment plant was compliant. So sort of have any questions? Sorry. I'll try and make it a bit more interesting next time.
So we're looking for questions. Councillor Dowson.
Thank you. And yeah, very detailed report. A lot of information stuff to go through, but just wondering if there was any concerns raised through any of this that you found, or any areas where the plant is sort of working better than expected.
The BTF is actually working probably a lot better than we have in previous years. And I guess it's just with some more control of the industry, we've ended up with less BOD coming to the wastewater treatment plant. So if you look at a trend over the years, we've ended up with less and less BOD coming to the treatment plant. So what's coming out is actually really quite nice. The only concern I've got is the whole effluent toxicity testing that we do. So that's about what is on the final discharge. And so we've done that over several years now. And so we had several compliant years, and then suddenly we had a non-compliant year. And so what we had found was that we split it up and actually looked at all three lines. So with the domestic only, industrial only, and the outfall. And so what we had found is that it's not domestic causing those problems, it's actually the industry. So again, it just gave us a push to go back to industry and go, you need to do better. And so over the last sort of year or two, we've just been trying to get better. So last year's whole effluent toxicity was compliant. We've just done this year's one. So we're waiting for reports that will come through in about May. So yeah, those are probably the highs and lows, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Horsnott.
So just what you referred to there in terms of something coming back in May, is that specifically on page 36, the study required to evaluate and confirm all of the matters in D. So the BTF plant monitoring and investigation study, was that something different? And if it's different, when is that one due?
So that one was actually done 3 years into the treatment plant. So that has been done. So that was back in 2013.
All right.
So the one that we're talking about now, so I have to find the page.
Yes.
Bear with me.
So
It's
that
towards the end.
so that table on the end should say that the study was completed and it was confirmed that the matters were complied with, I'm presuming.
So which clause are you looking at?
Page 36, wasn't it?
Page 36, yeah.
Sorry.
Page 36, condition D.
It's a historic account of compliance with the applied resource consent.
Yes.
So it starts from historic data, checking boxes.
Do we update it to say that we've done it?
So we have had it and we've passed it in previous meetings. So this is also the independent review panel actually went through it as well. So that report at the moment is, I understand, still in draft.
Right.
And so they did talk about that, but basically that it had been looked at and that those were looked at within that report. Yeah. So that's sort of, I probably should have said that it was done in 2013.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little behind that.
Confusing. No, it's all right. It's all right. So the one I'm talking about,
Sorry, Chris, just on that one.
Yes.
It's the comment that this is part of the independent review panel
Yeah,
would tell me that you're not happy with the report, the historical reporting that we've done.
no, not at all. Not at all.
Okay, so
It's just a
that's
note.
the disconnect I have with this independent review panel report. Shows up in your report a number of times.
yeah.
Yes.
There's no connection to it in your executive report. You talk about an annual plan that is still to be done. And that's where I got confused between the two.
Right.
Which
Okay.
one is which?
Yeah. So the independent review panel needs to be done every 6 years. So we've had one done recently. So I didn't want to comment on it just because it is still in draft. So in this next report, hopefully that'll be out of draft and I'll be able to make some comments about what they had said about that. So until it's final, I didn't really want to make any comments about that. But no, the study.
You had to just briefly mention that historically we've been up to date with these ones,
Right.
is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're putting a black mark against the whole report because you're waiting for an independent report
I
on
see.
the current one as opposed to the whole lot of being at fault. So that you're up to
Yeah.
date as you can.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely not a black mark meant at all. It was just that I didn't want to comment on this current independent review panel report until it was final. So that's what that is.
So the next meeting will be updated.
Yeah. The next annual report. So this
Annual.
one's been a bit late, but it
Right.
probably would be September. I think it's the next one after. So obviously because the end of the year will be
Right.
June. So then it'll be in the next WMC
the next-
meeting after that. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Do you have something else, Kerry?
Was just the operational costs of the rise in potential in the budget, which they kind of would clearly need the AUD, it's a high priority, but the significant increase in both operational costs and the overall budget probably leaves us less funds to actually explore that. Is there sort of likelihood of identifying soon some options getting better or worse?
So I understand from the budget lines that the operational capital budgets that are in there are actually separate from the AUD. So there's a separate budget line for the AUD. So no, I don't have access to it. So that's not part of that. Yeah, I'd love to have access to it, but no. So I think Neville's team and Wolf have been working on that. So I'm not sure what they have been doing. Sorry, so it's outside of what I'm being aware of. But there has been quite a bit of discussion about making sure we get that up and running and making sure that we've got progress on that as well. So, yeah.
Could we ask Neville, do you have any comments around this, Neville? Budget.
I don't want to to me, there is a lot of work has been done, but it falls over the last year. It's very long council. It is let down information of what we
Right.
Shannon, you've done an excellent job of listing all the criteria and
Mm.
but I do acknowledge that the manner in which the annual reports haven't been completed. I don't think that was I know in WTAG and WMC, we always tried to complete them, and there were good reasons why they weren't completed. And I didn't see that in here. I'm not saying that that's a bad part of it. I just want to acknowledge at this table that there were reasons why we didn't complete the annual report. It's not that we couldn't have completed an annual report. And I think that's just my one on the budget constraints that have stymied our investment in this project from a long time back, which is not your problem, Tracy.
Noted. Kerry, you happy to move on?
Sorry, just an answer to your other question. So the whole infant toxicity is on page 52. So it's the clause 56. So that was you were asking whether the whole infant toxicity was that other study. Yes. This is just an annual thing that we do here.
Larry, Councillor Foster.
Just on page 44, clause 33, and this may be historic as well, it's kind of confusing sometimes, but council has had some technical difficulties assessing this. This is held in the council hilltop water quality database, and council has had some technical difficulties assessing this data, which it is working on. Could you clarify that? And has the technical difficulties been resolved? 433, like I said, this could be historic.
Which clause? 3?
Clause 33.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
So probably should have explained a little bit more about, so some of these things are in this clause are about mass loading. And so when you're looking at the results in there, we don't actually have the mass loading aneurysm to calculate out. Also, the flow data is held on a SCADA system. This is hilltop, and they don't really talk that well. So it's just when you're reporting out of it, you kind of have to get it from multiple places. But it is available to anyone on request. So we went through this with the regulatory team and just explained to them, this is where this is where that is. Yeah. Okay. So it just makes it not a one-stop shop.
Sure. Yeah. Just when you read this, you kind of think, okay, well, it's a little bit of alarm. So yeah,
no,
that's interesting.
Yeah. Cool.
Any other questions of Tracy or Neville?
Mine's only a comment to Chair on the hilltop one. I noticed hilltop appeared in a lot of other places, so I knew it must have been working all right for other things that it was doing.
Okay. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
So we're in a position to go back to page 27. So we'll go back to where are we? Wastewater treatment plant stage 2 delivery update. So here we go. I noticed, I think from memory from last meeting, we were going to drop the word junior beside Ellie. I think, Pina, you brought that up previously. Junior wastewater advisor. Is that correct? Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. So
Yeah.
Ellie wants us to get us all.
We identified Ellie is not a junior wastewater advisor. She is a wastewater advisor. So thank you. We've got plenty of time. Hit the mic.
So what the plan was for today, we're obviously give a bit of an update on where we are for the delivery of the wastewater treatment plant. We are in negotiations with the preferred contractor at the moment. The plan was today to have some great news for everyone, but we're still working through that negotiation process. It's taking a little longer than we'd hoped. So what I am going to do is update you on all the other aspects. So currently we've got all our required consenting in place for the stage 2 plant to operate. That's the designation of 27 and 25 Bank Street. So that's been designated now as land which the wastewater treatment plant can operate on. We've also had the air discharge consent updated to include the new stage 2 work. So as soon as we tie down the contractor, then that work's all ready to happen. Of the 4 early procurement contracts that we've got in place, the UV is currently on a ship heading to New Zealand and will be in New Zealand in May. with delivery to site in June. The supplier of that's going to hold it in storage for a couple of months before they deliver it to us. We thought, given, I don't know if you guys know, but the state of world shipping at the moment is pretty arduous, so we thought it better safe than sorry and get it here while we could. The lamella clarifier, which is, I guess, the largest piece of equipment, all the material has been purchased and fabrication has begun on that. And that'll start coming to site in about August. The disc filters, we've had the last QA checks from an independent verifier done in Germany, and that's due on the ship sometime this month, with delivery again in about June. So that's the three, all arriving then. The final one is the sludge dewatering screw press. That is in manufacture. We'll be getting to site slightly later, sort of July, August, but they're all underway. We haven't had any delays or issues associated with COVID or anything like that. So there was originally a bit of risk or nervousness about getting those here and getting them delivered on time, but they're all on their way. So that's a large package of the total. That's a $6.5 million worth of equipment for the project is basically on its way or in manufacture. So the project's well on its way. Yeah, any questions, I guess, from the team in terms of?
Okay, Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you there, Drew. Yeah, good to hear things are happening and everything's being made, but you've obviously got a bit of a hiccup with the securing the or negotiating with the contract and everything. What my question is if that is delayed, will that impact on the rest of the project?
Yeah, obviously the starting point of when the contractor starts will impact on the delivery of the program. Their current program shows them finishing in June, July next year, with commissioning finished in August. There's no doubt that any delay at the front is going to push out to the back. However, at the same time, it is a lot of money and we want to make sure we get it right. Conditions at the moment, I don't know if people are aware, are difficult to get supply, and cost escalation on materials is fluctuates a lot. So we're working through that with the contractor.
Kerry, Councillor Warsnop.
Just probably two things on that. I'm presuming we're possibly able at the next meeting to get an update on the impacts because you'll know more by then.
Yep.
And what that does to our end dates and our budgets if they're impacted. So just really, yeah, I guess the sooner we know when things start, or if they start to deviate from our original plans, the better. And also just awesome to hear that those big critical components are pretty much in train or in transit. I know that nationally everyone's trying to build something. So just in terms of the more rudimentary construction materials, are we fairly confident with those?
That's all part of this discussion we're having with the contractor on what that looks like. Where the risk sits. Does it sit with council or does it sit with the contractor? Right. If it sits with the contractor, you've got to pay for it anyway. How much do they? Yeah, so it is part of the negotiation that we're working through at the moment and landing on the sweet spot, I guess.
Yeah, okay. And you expect to be able to give us an update on that at the next meeting?
We should definitely be able to give you an update at the next meeting. Cool, yeah. We were actually, so I think we were having that award discussions were penciled in for yesterday and today. So yeah, we haven't hit those, but it should be coming sometime soon.
Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. Just a couple of small questions. The discussion on page 13 doesn't mention that, so there's a summary discussion around wastewater treatment plant upgrade, and doesn't make a mention that council is purchasing the land from GHL in there, although it does mention that land is owned by GHL several times, so I think that's just saying it needs to be included for clarity. The question I did have was around the legal matters and compliance with the being compliant post 31st of December 2020. Did we need a variation? Have we applied for that variation to maintain compliance?
Do you want me to answer this question? Yep. So my understanding is that council, as of the 1st of January, council is non-compliant. Originally, we were going to apply for a variation to the consent to extend out the time until the time of the old consent conditions until we'd finished stage 2 of the treatment plant, which was going to be sort of June, July next year, or 2022. However, when Dave Wilson approached the relevant parties, it was identified that that would be opposed, and rather than following that process, the decision was made to remain non-compliant and put the effort into getting the plant built.
That decision was made by who?
I say I wasn't actually there, so I'm only speaking out of turn.
I'll invite the CEO.
So through the chair, no decision has been made. Some options were being worked through. My understanding was that from, as Drew was saying, in terms of some of the conversations that were had, any variation that we would have put forward at this stage would be objected to. So part of that, in terms of bringing forward the disinfectant stage clarification, was to demonstrate our progress towards being able to then fully go forward and amend the consent and be compliant with that. So no decision has been made on that. That's something that needs to come back to the WMC and to council.
Thank you. I think all of these papers in light of that are very, very light on risk. They're very light on the fact that we're non-compliant. All of them mention the possibility of legal risk around non-compliance from the 31st, but that's all put in relation to the fact, to the previously adopted LTP, which the intent of bringing forward was to mitigate that, as you mentioned, but it's very, very unclear throughout this that we're actually at legal risk right now. We are non-compliant right now, and that we need a paper brought to us as soon as possible, or preferably prior to the 31st of December to make a decision on that action. The fact that we've now been non-compliant for some months and it's completely unclear in any of these papers is concerning.
We'll bring back a paper to WMC and or council on this matter.
Thank you.
I'd suggest it's urgent enough to come to council.
Council, yeah.
And it's our legal risk. It's council's legal risk, so it should come back as soon as possible.
Vinay.
From my position on both committees, I'm concerned about the legal risk to council, which council holds, in getting a report back to council, so we understand that portion of it. In terms of decisions, I don't mind which way the decision-making process happens, whether it comes from us and gets put through, but council still needs to understand its current legal risks. So yeah, and we know there's a council meeting before there's another WMC meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Just inviting the Dean to
Yeah,
comment.
so through the chair, it clearly highlights that we need to expedite some information back either way. And whether, so there's a couple of options we can look at, which is a council paper and an extraordinary WMC. So we can work through timing of that, take the point, you need some more information and need clarity around risks, and then next what we were going to move to next. But just want to reinforce that no decision has been made at staff level around what actions are going to be taken at this stage.
Councillor Worsnell.
I'm glad that Shannon raised this point, because it's not until you mention it that my understanding prior to joining this committee was that we knew we were very likely to run out of time. However, the presumption was that there would be a consent application lodged, so we would be actively pursuing an extension of that. So that having materially changed, that's quite different. And given that there would have been a lot of time leading up to, knowing that we were going to run out of time, yeah, I think that's quite concerning and potentially kind of undermines to a certain extent our ability to look as though we've had this, we're proactive in it. Where does it come to this committee in terms of we're set to, as Penny says, the consent conditions, and yet currently there aren't any that apply to us because we're outside of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so. This isn't about any undermining. We need to be clear that the council has traditionally delayed the progress towards meeting its consent compliance. It wasn't until maybe a couple of years, 3 years back, when the decision to then start moving and funding and putting that into the LTP happened. Where we're at today is, my understanding is there have been conversations through Mr. Wilson and with iwi around next steps forward. That information discussion hasn't come back to council in terms of what that might look like. And so that's where we are at in terms of that gap. So rather than deal with it now, because I don't have all of the information in front of me, I'd rather I'm able to go away, get that information and bring that back.
Absolutely. I think that's the only way forward and fair. And if it means an extraordinary meeting of this committee, then we have it. Everyone happy with that? Well, not happy, but I mean, yeah. Okay, point taken. Any more questions of Drew?
Oh, Mr. Chair, just comment on previous discussions. So I'm not sure if we all remember, but I think November or December, we had a report done, and I forgot the guy's name who did the report, but that's what Drew referred to in terms of there being an objection to the consents. But within that report were options.
Right.
Right. So it wasn't just that would be objections, but there were options put in that report that we did consider.
So we need to go back and look at where the process has gone, where it hasn't gone. Noted, Ron.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So why I'm raising that, so from an area point of view, some of those options, I think were important for our outcomes. So there was a bit more emphasis on AUD and etc.
Noted. So Drew, contingencies and, you know, into budgets and things in the negotiation, all highly at the top of the negotiation, no doubt. Use your button.
These discussions are sort of above, have been sort of put above me, and I'll let them work through it. I've been doing the best I can to deliver the treatment plant stage 2 upgrade, and some of the consent decisions we'll come back to it at the next meeting.
The next meeting will be a long one and a good one by the sound of things. You know. The Dean thinks
I think it was
218.
219 or 218.
No, yeah,
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 yeah.
prior.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, but part of that report said by this time we would be compliant based on the options.
We would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Angus? No? Any more questions of Drew?
Sorry, one thing that I forgot to add is I'm finishing up. I'm actually leaving to get... Perfect timing. This has got too much for me. I'm out of here. Shannon, thanks. Goodbye. No, I'm going to move closer to some family. And John over here will be taking over the delivery. Stand up, John, say hi.
John.
He's going to be the council project manager for the delivery phase.
Hi, John.
I'm going to assist him in sort of a handover phase, and sort of close out this design and getting the contractor on board, etc. But he's going to be in charge of the delivery. So
Well, oh well.
he'll have some hard questions.
Hope you just didn't make up your mind sitting here this morning. But thank you for your effort and your contribution, and we look forward to working with you, John, as we go forward on this significant community project. Is that the end of
Yeah, that
your
was the end of
report?
my part, unless anyone else has got any questions.
Pino? Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Just one more thing.
Leroy.
So the reporting on the AUD stuff is.
Yeah,
is
we
that
can
gonna
do
come
that
later?
at the same time. Yeah, we can do that now while I'm here.
Yeah, let's do that now, eh?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm just
So-
wanting to get an update as to where we are in terms
Where
of.
we are, so last year, AUD, we obviously, one of the big components of that was taking out mortuary wastewater from the wastewater stream. That's progressing well, and it's basically waiting on the bylaw
Yes.
adaptation. So as soon as that adaptation's happened, then that'll get underway. Some of the other AUD stuff going forward is going to be biosolids, and how those biosolids from the stage 2 upgrade are going to be dealt with. We're currently approaching local contractors to look at how that is going to be managed or disposed of, and it's going to be part of the Kiwa agenda moving forward. So the next AUD component is biosolids, and then once we've got that under wraps, we'll be looking at the wider matter of what happens to the wastewater out of the upgrade. I think one of the key questions you've got there is wetland, where, when, and how. So that once we've sorted out the AUD associated with stage 2, we'll be looking at those matters.
Yeah, so I guess my concern is that we're going to leave a lot of the stuff till, as we're progressing through the rest. And I'm just interested to know, it's got to be some ongoing work to find, viable uses for the recycled water.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely part of that. I think in the LTP at the moment, it's maybe 10 years out. So that there is some space between the completion of the plant and the construction of the wetlands. The other thing is, it is once you have a product, it is easier to find a home for it than before you have the product and people say, well, show me what you've got. And we say, well, it's going to be this, but there's nothing like taking a sample and saying, here's what we have. This is what we've done all this discussion today on. This is what it could be used for. Once you have a product, it's easy to find a home for. If that doesn't answer your question, but makes sense.
Ron?
To you, Mr. Chair, could someone just describe to me the next steps around the bylaw?
Tracy, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Like to come up? There's no speaker down there. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, there was one. Okay. Jump aside.
Sorry, so what was the question? An upgrade. Mortuary waste bylaw. The trade waste bylaw.
What's the timeframes and-
So we're looking at, we're actually in the middle of consultation now and past the halfway point. So we're looking at, I think it's in April, going to a meeting and basically looking at whether we pass the bylaw then. So as of right now, we have no submissions. So we are reminding people that it is actually up for consultation, but we're hoping we've just done a really good job with pre-consultation and it'll just go through. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, so basically we're looking at hopefully having that in the next few months, depending on what submissions do come back. But yeah, we've drafted it, it's gone out for consultation. Again, we haven't had any feedback, so hopefully, I'm pretty sure the meeting is next month at the next council meeting.
Just adding to that, has to be administered, etc.
It has gone.
Oh, it has gone
Yep.
to minister, so the process to get to from what's left.
So we obviously spent quite a bit of time drafting it, so we ended up kind of almost rewriting the bylaw just to make it a bit easier to use, but it did include the exclusion of mortuary waste. We also made some minor changes just to make it a bit more flexible for users. So once we did that, we went out for pre-consultation first. So we went out to sort of the big industry users and sort of the main players, if you like, and put it out there for all the current consent holders so that they knew what was going on there. So having done that, we got a little bit of feedback, which we got some feedback from Sedenco, the hospital and Ovation. So some of them were just queries, which were easy to respond to, so that was really good. We did a lot of meetings as well, so we've had meetings with the bigger industry and some of the key players as well. So then we've basically brought it back to go to formal consultation, which is where we are now. And then once we end that final consultation, we'll have whatever submissions come in, and then it's basically to the meeting and then discuss any proposals from any of the submissions and then implement it. The mortuary bylaw, also the mortuary waste part of it, has a end date, if you like. So what we're trying to do is not sort of preempt that there's a place to put it before we've got it. So there is part of that process which I think Neville's team is organising, which is actually the building of the disposal point for that. So I understand that there has had some work towards it as well.
Right.
It sounds really quick and easy, but it's taken some work.
Any more questions? Councillor Dowson?
Thank you. I'll just run through a couple of quick ones I had. It says in the report that CE and Mayor currently, all the acquisition of land for the wetland has been elevated to CE and Mayor. Is that progressing well? I don't need any commission detail. No, not progressing yet.
It's not, through the chair, it's not progressing at the pace that may be required. So it's really waiting on parties to get together, coordinate diaries and have a meeting.
Okay, does it need to broaden the membership outside of the CE and Mayor to try to get some support, or is it?
No, it's really a matter of having a meeting and getting a meeting date with the key people involved. So the CE and Mayor are available.
Okay. Alternative funding for AUD. It's mentioned in there we haven't found any support for external funders at the moment. Have we considered other councils which may be in similar situations, or other industry providers which may be in similar situations that might be able to contribute a commercial relationship for the research?
I'm not, no, I can't say whether we have or not. What part of the discussions that I've been involved in really goes back to around some of this work has been done elsewhere, not in New Zealand. The issue is around the demand for the product once you've been able to clear and then apply it. So it goes back to, yeah, market demand for product. But yeah, I can't say whether or not we've been engaging with the other councils around some research, but I can follow that up.
Yeah, I'd imagine that if we're breaking ground and creating a product that, for example, could be used on kiwi fruit, and we've got to do all of the legwork to make a product usable in that industry, there's an enormous commercial value to the work that we're doing for the country, not just for the region. So I would suggest that there may be commercial opportunities to find co-funders for this research and development, not just government agency and other kind of support.
Yeah, just in response to that, there has been conversations like this, you know, with quite a diverse group within the community, driven by the chamber document. But the thing I've always struggled with is, why do we have to wait until we're producing the product to then decide what could we do with it if we know the level it's going to be taken to?
Yep. Look,
They're perfect, so why not be ahead of the game? And you know, I was just thinking before looking at this small agenda, maybe have this little general business at the end of it and just expand on this conversation.
Yeah, that's all I'm suggesting, is that perhaps if we're finding insignificant routes into funding through our usual channels, then perhaps we need to diversify and look at commercial pathways or collaborative models with other councils, etc., that may have the same challenges.
There's definitely challenges around, like for directly on to fruit or horticulture, but you know, if you take the Taupo example, the Ashburton and the Southland, they're pushing wastewater to grow silage to feed dry stock. And if I talking to Kevin Strongman, who used to work for council, Taupo haven't got enough land, they just can't produce enough, and it's a big income earner. So I mean, that's digressing a bit, but it's so,
yep.
I think Leroy has started by saying, hey, why do we have to wait another 10, 15 years or whatever? Is there any way of fast tracking this? And it doesn't always have to be council investment if it stacks up commercially. Council, sorry,
just one more question. Build risk on the new plant, have we broken ground there yet? Have we done some surveying of the site? Have we looked at ground load testing
on stage 2 site?
Yep.
So stage 2 site works, the contractor that was renting the land from GHL has moved out. Contamination testing's been done, and there's the material's not deemed contaminated. It's deemed higher than background levels, and so that means that it's not a risk to anyone using it, but you can't use it as clean fill. We've currently come up with a methodology to shift that to the front of the site, and that's underway. We just need to wait for site works to shift the rest of their build out before that can happen. So in terms of, is everything ready for the start of the construction, we've got site work shifted out of the main area. We've done the testing that needs to be done. We've come up with a plan of the small amount of material that can't go to clean fill of where it's going to go. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Sorry, Councillor Wassmer.
Just had a question around how we were trying to attract investment in the AUD. Given that we've settled on a wetland as the appropriate way to treat it, are we approaching it as purely a water infrastructure project, or are we able to split it and apportion more value to the biodiversity aspects of it, which has enormous potential for funding. And that might give you enough of a start to attract some commercial into the other part of it.
So there's a couple of work streams here. There is a limited budget that we're doing. The next step, I believe, in the AUD is a really good comms plan and team of going out and looking for options outside of what we've looked at currently. And that's approaching industry, talking through it with them, looking at outside of government research, etc. So
just on that as well, industry broadly have huge appetite for green projects because it's fantastic for their brand. It's fantastic to be able to demonstrate visually something that you've contributed to. So when you talk about the comms, it's less about we want to use water and more about we want to improve this, that, and everything else. So yeah, I support the role that comms has to play, but I do think you still need enough funding sitting there to start to give industry confidence that they're not just front loading the whole thing themselves. That you know what I mean?
Chief
To
Executive.
make a comment, probably more so an observation as well, is around so the discussion around AUD, but also having, so that's one part. A big focus here is that the council needs to start thinking about in project planning staged approach to the wetland, because we can get distracted around looking at research funding over here, but fundamental is around how do you close off that pipe going out to the bay. So what I propose we do is if we give us some time to pull together some a roadmap to how we're going to get there. That will give us clarity around the different streams that Drew and the team have been talking about, and bring that together so you can kind of see what that's looking like. Because, you know, as part of that, you've seen that there's a discussion to be had around where, there's a discussion to be had around what does that look like, what, you know, how we're going to logistically deliver it. There's the biodiversity aspect, which is, yeah, it's definitely part of a wetland approach too. So, so yeah, if we can do that, that might help.
Yeah, it's just surely you have an idea where that wetland is going to be located? Given it's going to come from the
I think there was a paper that came to council with 2 or 3 options of where it could be, and the decision on where that is what we've talked about being elevated up the chain to the chief executive and the mayor of making that decision of which of the options are best, because
We can circulate that paper, but just to clarify, the decision isn't with myself and the chief executive. The decision will be with the people that we are engaging with as to whether or not that's appropriate, and then the discussion with council.
Yeah, those people undercover at the moment. Yeah. Well, is
Commercial
it going to be
sensitive.
artificial wetland, or is it going to be a natural one? So it's just about
Still to work through, so I'd rather not discuss like the details of you know, locations and who we're engaging with in the public domain, just because that we need to undertake negotiations and they can approve that.
Sorry.
Sorry, Leroy was next.
Sorry, yeah, I like the idea of developing a roadmap, if you like. It'd be also useful to have where those off ramps and on ramps are, because I'm not sure that everyone's going to require the pristine water, you know, that potentially comes out the end. So it's be useful to have alternatives where some may choose to have it less treated. You know, there potentially some benefits in that, but I think it's really important to understand what the range of options are around, because we're talking 5 million cubes. You know, applying all of that into drinking water standard is not really necessary. So be useful to understand what our options are, and then potentially attract different funding for a range of projects rather than one massive project, which is how do we treat 5 million cubes to X standard, X level.
It must already be pretty much known what the standard of the water will be coming out the pipe once this first upgrade is done. Otherwise,
Yeah.
what are we doing?
So we've presented a couple of times to the WMC on the standard of water we'll be getting out of stage 2, and options for that water based on what people are doing overseas. And also that the wetland serves 2 purposes. A, removing the pipe, the outfall pipe, and B, as a storage device. For example, people aren't going to be using all that water today. So there's going to be ups and downs in the winter, for example. You're going to have a lot less people taking that water. So you've got to have somewhere for it to go if it's not going to go the outfall pipe. So the wetland serves sort of 2 purposes, a storage facility and a mouldy enhancement.
Councillor Dowson.
Thank you. This is just for a bit of clarity, but Angus, because I don't think you participated in the conversations prior to the earlier conversations on the wetland designs, but they were essentially it's land in a region around the airport area somewhere, because of the location of the current site. Because of that, that puts a lot of determinations on the type of wetland we need to build, which was identified as a dense reed bed wetland, which meant that it didn't attract ducks and bird life to live within the wetland, which is an airstrike risk around the airport area. And because of the high water table in Tarapte, it needed to be elevated, not dug in to the land. So it would be a fully tanked wetland that would be elevated above the ground level because of our high water table. All of that is in reports from earlier on, but to give you a little bit of...
There are plenty of wetlands around airports in New Zealand, Hawke's Bay, you know, and yeah, I don't think birds strike, although I know going way back when there's talk of the old turbot plan, the potential around that for water sports like Wakaram and that, the airport jumped up and down. But I think, you know, you can just see examples all around New Zealand of that being managed. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So any more questions of Drew around that before I take him to page 61? Oh, sorry, Larry.
I've got a question that's not related to AUD, but it's part of
Hit your button, please.
Wastewater Management Committee annual. Sorry. Yeah, I've got a question, but it's not related to AUD. It's about related to the Wastewater Management Committee annual report. Back on page 14, but I didn't want to confuse the issue while we're discussing AUD, because originally you said we're going back to page 29, so I thought we're going to do the other ones afterwards, but obviously we're doing everything together.
Well,
yeah, no,
go for it.
So okay, I'm on page 14,
right.
On 23, it's about the overflows. Now, it's about investigations to identify causes of these unexpected overflows, and we've got a raft of different reasons why we have overflows, fatbergs, unexpected, burst private water mains. We've got a whole raft here, but for me, there's only way that these get discovered is when we have a high rainfall or a rain incident. So we are always going to be chasing our tail, I believe, if we don't up our monitoring somehow. So can I just have someone to
Sure, Neville's right behind you.
Talk us about this. I know it's a major concern, but you know, the ultimate goal is to try and alleviate as many overflows as possible. And to me, a lot of these things are only being picked up when we have a high rain incidents. And I'm asking, is there a way that we can pick these up prematurely so we don't have these incidents happening?
Right, Neville.
Through the chair, this is always a major challenge for us. We are being proactive and we have increased the budgets for jet cleaning to remove fatbergs and the like. What we're actually getting through is a lot of wet wipes, and this is a national issue that's come about probably in the last 5 years, is the quantum of wet wipes that we're now getting in the reticulation. So we are modifying our maintenance now to the issues, the likes of the fatberg that we had at Caltex on Wainuiori Road. That was actually jet cleaned 2 years prior. So we did a major investment over $100,000 of jet cleaning of the main interceptor. What we had is within that time frame, we had a rebuild of that whole fatberg, which was composed mainly of wet wipes and rags. So we've now modified our regime just to that particular point. It was obviously a much higher sensitive issue. So we're now doing a much more proactive clean of those known areas. And the difficulty we've got is actually knowing where they are through the whole network. And as we say, council actually has invested more money now in jet cleaning. With regards to overflows, the difficulty we've got is in certain weather events, we don't expect overflows. You know, we haven't had the quantum of rain we have yet. We had the overflows and they're kind of like unexplained. So we have to go looking for it. And remember, we've got 222 kilometres of pipe. So it's a kind of almost a needle in the haystack scenario. And through that COVID period, we had significant problems with pump stations blocking because a lot of people were at home and their behaviour changed quite a lot. So it's been an ongoing issue, but what we can say is in the recent rainfall event, we had 75 mils of rain. Normally that would probably have driven us to an overflow. We can actually say that we weren't even close to coming near an overflow. So the work that the DrainWise team are doing now with regards to removal of downpipes into gully traps, sealing damaged gully traps, the improved jet cleaning program we're doing appears to be starting to pay dividends, and the public drain on private property is now in year 3. So we're starting to see some of the benefits that are starting to come through. So that last rainfall, what happens in a rainfall event, the Wainuiori pump station will kick in and start pumping directly to the treatment plant. In that rainfall event, the pump station only just started right at the very peak of the storm and then cottoned off. So we are actually feeling a little bit more confident that some of the work that we are doing is now starting to pay benefits.
Thank you. Kerry, did you have a question?
Saw it that there was thought to be a significant private leak that was consistently putting pressure in a certain area. Did we find it? I'm trying to find where I actually saw that.
There was a connection of a leaking pipe into a sewer. So yes, and it's been fixed.
Cool, thank you.
No more questions around that issue? Sorry.
I've just got one more, just around the recommendation for a comms process around the AUD, of going back a bit. But I do appreciate we've got quite a diverse audience of ratepayers and people in the region with similar aspirations. But I think if that communications is left to the end, it potentially appears a bit disingenuous, because it's sort of like, okay, we've got to get rid of it now, as opposed to getting people, it's moving that thinking as early as possible, so that when it does come on stream, people are already buying into the idea that this is a viable and a useful resource. And I think the sooner that happens, that process, whoever's going to be responsible for that, the better, because otherwise we've got lots of work happening in now, and then it's sort of like trying to do a last minute sell once we've got something, and almost becomes a discount sale to convince people to take it up. You know, I understand there is a small funds available with the AUD budget to maybe direct some of those to that ongoing communications.
Yeah, cool. you. So we'll go to 61 now, which is you again, Drew, I believe. No, I thought as a collective, or do you want to, or should we do it individually? Pardon, sorry, Kim. Okay. Okay. Shannon, are you? Mover and a seconder for that? Larry, thank you. All in favour? Aye. There was, this is, yeah.
Live.
So the one on page 27? Seconder, please. Ron, thank you. All in favour? Aye. Thank you, Pene. Thank you, seconder. Kerry, thank you. All in favour? Aye. And well, 61. Angus, move, thank you, seconder. Larry, thank you. All in favour? Aye. Thank you, carried. That's it, eh? So, yeah. Hmm.
No, it's good, good paper this, and really applaud the introduction of a Rahui. But my question would be, what would the Rahui process look like when, if it was implemented? And because I do believe that we need to up our game on when we do have these incidences and get as much information out to the public as possible. And the Rahui is actually the perfect way of performing this. So yeah, I would just like to know how how it would be implemented.
Yeah, anyone? Right. Well, that concludes our meeting. Pene, would you like to close our meeting? Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, sorry, Ron.
so just a couple of questions from me.
Sure, sorry.
So just picking up Leroy's comments around that work program. I don't think it's work program for Kiwa, but I think it is a work program we need to find an avenue to someone to be investigating. So what are we going to do?
What was this roadmap? Yeah, it's part of that, isn't it?
Oh, so I'll go first and then you can. So what I was referring to was roadmap in terms of a high level governance one, so that you can track where, you know, where the work streams are at what particular time, what's being done in those areas. So if there's any other project specific or other working parties that have work programs, I think that's more at an operational level. My intention wasn't to bring that through, but if that's something that the committee sees benefit in, and if I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. Wilson, and if the team have capacity to be able to pull that together, then I'm sure that's something that they can do.
Drew, did you want to come in?
So there's definitely two work streams there. There's the Kiwa aspect and their recommendation in terms of how it works with tikanga and how we should be approaching the use of reusing wastewater. And there's also that's with the Kiwa, and then there's a separate work stream of working with potential users and developing an appetite for them to take the water. and those two are going to link together.
So who's leading that work?
That will be John moving forward. So that I was looking after AUD. John will be looking after that. But like we talked about, we think there needs to be a comms role in there to approach potential users and get them on side and help them a lot, help us get to an end result.
Okay, can I suggest through you, Mr. Chair, that a group is formed to assist with that work rather than just leaving to a council staff member? We have had industry working teams before. I think that might be a way forward to take into considerations the comments Leroy has said, yourself and Shannon, around commercial uptake and investment.
Yep. Chief Executive.
Yes, through the chair, so if part of the action is that we take that offline, Mr. Wilson, when he's back, can have a discussion, talk with you yourself, or and then determine what that looks like. But in principle, that sounds absolutely fine.
Cool. Just before we, anyone else got any other closing comments? Jerry?
I'd just support that. I think it's quite important for the table here to be able to visualize what Leroy was saying before, what the options are and all of the process, so that we're exploring at each point where you potentially shut off an option or a new one opens up, and just so that we're cognizant of what the different quality at each stage means. And if we still end up with exactly the same as what is currently, I think, broadly the idea, that's fine, but there might be opportunities for uptake along the way earlier, which I think all of us probably have an appetite for being involved in, because it's probably one of the more exciting projects, I think, and opportunities that the region has.
So just within my former life, this is the paper, it's a hard copy if anyone wants to grab one, of the work we did at the chamber. And we talked to a lot of people that are named on the back, and some of them in this room, of the potential of using water at a level. I know there's a bit of feedback based off my article in the paper this week, but it's about understanding the quality of the water coming out and how sooner rather than later, if we're talking years, or how it all fits. And Councillor Dowsing, last comment.
Thank you. And I was just going to refer back to page 2 with our terms of reference, and just encourage staff to look through that. I mean, the first term in there, ensure implementation, commissioning and monitoring of the wastewater treatment plant is carried out in accordance with the consent conditions. We identified a failure of that today. I don't see, it's very hard to have visibility of our work program going forward as to what we're going to be dealing with in this committee. So I'd encourage our chairs to work with staff to look through these terms of reference, and see what we have coming up. There's things in here that are worth noting, like ensure the development of educational information to encourage reductions in domestic and industrial wastewater. I don't see that coming to this table at this stage. So if it's going to be in our terms of reference, it should be in our work program. And there's a lot of other ones in there that we could target, but I'd like to see something going forward that reflects these terms of reference and gives us some certainty around the fact that we're meeting those terms.
Thank you.
Just noted the comments around COVID. I wondered if, in terms of our monitoring, we have any data suggesting anything out of that.
COVID. And do we have any data?
So in terms of COVID testing and the
Testing.
wastewater. Tracy.
Tracy's just coming up to your microphone.
So we didn't individually do COVID testing, but we have had the public health unit here actually instigate some testing that they did. They haven't shared that with us, but we went through and actually looked at what we had. Because we had very few cases here, most of them had come in, stayed, one guy had stayed at the hospital, the others were sort of self-isolating. We were almost the the test, so the blank, if you like, in a test. So they were basically checking us to make sure that their tests were more accurate, making sure it was sort of, so when they were detecting it, that they were. So we have done, or assisted them with that, but I haven't heard anything back to say that we have actually got anything that came through in that wastewater. Again, the quantity of wastewater to how many people who are ill, it's very unlikely we're going to pick anything up. So.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, so just subsequent to that,
Sure.
if there are other elements that we should be testing for, I think I'd like our council staff to give some thought to that. So whilst we're testing for what's in the consent, I'll look a bit future and have a look at what we should be looking at going forward.
Any comment? No. Thank you. Pino. Thank you, everyone. A cup of tea over there.
Apologies for
Pardon?